Normally, whenever I make a video, I dish out a bit of a teaser on Twitter regarding what it's going to be about. I said that I'd be making a video response to you, and I got one of two responses. Oh my goodness, yes, I'm looking forward to this, and please, dear God, don't respond to him, it's way too much. However, I have decided to respond to you, and quite honestly, I was wishy-washy about responding to the video after I had watched it, considering your points about harassment and how trigger-happy you are to scream a horrible thing into the ether in order to prevent people from responding to the points you make. You've already been taken down in nearly every conceivable arena. The principle angle, logical angle, factual angle, rhetorical angle have all been covered. I don't want people to think I'm beating a dead horse as opposed to my actually picking up a shovel and attempting to bury it. Not in a violent, vengeful way, but in a way that exemplifies pity for just how broiled your brain has become, or for how long it took people to realize that it was, in fact, cooked. It's time for you to stop, Steve. You're making the exact same mistakes over and over again and refusing to learn anything from it. But yes, please, take it away, Steve Shives.
Yes, I'm a YouTube atheist, but try not to hold that against me, okay?
No, Steve, I'm not going to use the fact that you are a YouTube atheist against you. I'm using the fact that you are Steve Shives and a dogmatic feminist against you. Shives, you block people if they aren't in your ideological camp, or if they say something untoward, or, I don't know by exactly what criteria you block people, but you block with the frivolity of a 6-year-old in a candy store with an unlimited sum of money. Why? Why do you block people in the sweeping manner that you do? If I know you at all, you will most likely claim it's because of all of the horrific harassment you receive, and because these people are not being constructive. I've noticed something about the term being constructive within your little ideological pocket, Steve. It includes people like Christy Winters. But you think that being constructive means improving on the ideas that you already hold. You think that being constructive means refining the ideas you currently hold in your head. Reasonable people are telling you why the ideas in your head are not worth refining because they are fundamentally flawed. It's like starting a channel wherein you make arguments that the moon is made of cheese, you block everyone who tells you why that's a stupid idea and accuse them of not being constructive, and then you turn around and claim you're promoting civil discussion because you can disagree about which type of cheese the moon is made out of. Look, we have people who think it's Gouda, people who think it's Camembert, people who think it's white cheddar. We even have someone who thinks it's a frozen sphere of blue cheese dressing. The moon is not cheese, Steve. And all of these rude anti-cheesers are not the problem. The things that you have claimed are facts in the past are not facts in the slightest.
Here are 5 toxic things about YouTube atheism.
Are you actually going to do it, Steve? Are you going to criticize yourself here? Who am I kidding? We all know you're not going to. What confuses me is why you're so dysfunctionally obsessed with the YouTube atheism community. What makes one a member of this community? I'm an atheist and I run a YouTube channel. I think in maybe 3 videos out of the nearly 300 videos I've put out, I discuss that topic and how I don't believe in any type of god or gods. Here's what kind of worries me. Why does every opinion have to be a goddamn community? People who are not the same exact person are bound to agree on one topic and disagree on another. You are such a superficial thinker, Steve. Your opinion is not the foundation of reason and rationality, and your opinion is not an argument against fact. It turns into a lie when you use opinion to negate fact, Steve, whether intentional or otherwise.
Number 1, it has a sexism problem.
Oh, does it? I'm quite sure that you have mountains upon mountains of evidence to prove that YouTube atheists are overwhelmingly sexist. Please, shower me with your evidence, Steve. I want to drown in your evidence. I want to climb to the top of Mount Steve Shives' sexism evidence and nearly freeze to death while simultaneously running short on oxygen. I don't think you know what sexism is, Steve. I think that you see a woman losing a debate with a man and immediately think sexism and misogyny. What's interesting about this is, and maybe it happened this way, I wasn't around at that point in time, but YouTube used to be filled with the religious debate a while back. There used to be atheists and religious people duking it out all the time before different ideologies began making their presences known. How often did atheists accuse religious people of harassment? How often did atheists shadow ban all religious people who disagreed in their comment sections? How often did atheists say that their feelings were hurt over mean words and that's why religious people are wrong? At least from what I've seen, it didn't happen very often. However, there were false flagging campaigns from religious people, attempts to have atheists silenced, smear campaigns against atheists, all being fedora-wearing Dawkins and devil worshippers, smear campaigns saying they have no morals and all that. All of those things were done because the religious were losing the argument. They were losing it, Steve. Now, who do you sound more like when you say this next sentence? Which side do you sound like when you say this next sentence?
Many of the most popular atheists on YouTube are brazen anti-feminists.
I thought you said it had a sexism problem. Anti-feminism is not sexism, just like atheism is not devil worship. You refuse to listen to the people who actually politely disagree with you on the matter of feminism, scream sexism, and then either shadow ban them, block them, and or refuse to admit they exist. You want to paint an opinion held by many men and many women as automatically sexist when it is nothing of the sort. People oppose feminism for different reasons. Some are concerned with the factual inaccuracies thrown around by many feminists. Some are concerned about the demonization and hatred of men. Some are concerned about their active attempted hindrance on the subject of men's rights. Some are concerned about how authoritarian they are on the subject of basic human freedoms. And some are concerned with all of those things, or a combination of them. Steve, I highly doubt that you have watched any videos of mine, and that's perfectly all right. But I do not decide to do responses to videos based on the fact that the person making the argument is a man or woman. Honestly, if you look through my channel history, I've probably done a pretty equal number of responses to men and women. I'm not entirely sure what the numbers are, but people can collect that data for themselves. I'm sure that the numbers are not exactly equal, but probably pretty close. The criteria for my choosing a video to respond to is regarding what is said, not what the person happens to look like. Sometimes my video is just responding to an idea on its own, and I write a little essay about it. But I'm sure that I'm a sexist anyway because I'm criticizing feminism outside the purview of the feminism bubble, right? Well, here's the kicker, Steve. You can't block me from my own channel. You can't shadow ban me from my own comment section. The criticism will never stop flowing like a tidal wave of pyroclastic avalanches until you sit back, take a deep breath, and just admit to the world that you were incorrect about something. You allowed yourself to be taken in by an ideology and baked yourself inside of an echo chamber until your insane ramblings sounded like reason to you. They aren't, Steve.
Who insult and belittle women and men, but mostly women, who speak out against gender inequality.
And all I'm asking for is proof of this gender inequality faced by women. And I don't just mean inequality based on free choice. I mean inequality based on the law and proven discriminatory practices. I have, on this channel, on multiple occasions given proof of legal gender inequality faced by men, that being circumcision and the inability for men to surrender parenthood should the woman will him not to. Yet, when I speak out against that gender inequality, I'm called a misogynist by you, Steve. I'm called someone who just sits there in his mother's basement screaming, "What about the men's?" like some sort of weird town crier who just escaped from being committed to an institution. Steve, I've analyzed you and I know what your game plan is. You take a group that has a decent number of people opposed to feminism in it, the men's rights movement being one of them, and obviously anti-feminist being one of them, and you smear shit all over every single one of those people's faces by calling them sexist, misogynist harassers, and then, when each of these people individually respond to you by saying, "Fuck you, Steve, I'm none of these things, quit being a moron," you put out a video saying, "See? Look at how toxic these people are. It totally proves the point I was making. You're not looking for a civil discussion with anyone who has the opinions that I do, Steve. You would receive a much more civil response if you simply said, I think that the people who say opinion X are wrong about this certain thing. Here's my reasoning, blah, blah, blah. I appreciate you watching the video. I'm interested in your opinions. If you think I'm wrong, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below. But you don't do that, Steve, and you never will do that. You will continue to sit there and say, anyone who says opinion X is a fucking evil human being who should not be dealt with. Don't even speak to these terrible people. They're morally inferior to me. I'm not even going to deal with their points because of just how disgusted I am by them. You've convinced yourself that being factually inaccurate is perfectly fine to the point of knowingly spreading objective lies because you think you have the moral high ground. You don't, and it isn't, Steve. I'm not saying that no disagreement implies moral detriment. What I'm saying is that not every disagreement implies moral detriment. This is the latter situation. Get on board. Here's how you fix the problem you're having. Try imagining someone who is opposed to feminism and not a sexist. If you're watching this video, I will give you a few seconds. Were you able to do that, Steve? If not, then something is screwed up in your brain. You think feminism is the only proper thing to call yourself if you're a proponent of gender equality under the law, don't you? It must be a horrific existence to think that an opinion only exists if it has its own movement, and you can only believe something if you call yourself a member of that movement. You don't care about opinion. You care about keeping the word feminism buffed and polished. But you don't do that by actually attempting to buff and polish the word feminism. You do that by flinging garbage all over everyone else's words. Steve, throwing mud at someone doesn't make you cleaner.
They also proudly deny the existences of things like
the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Wage gap, rape culture, gender imbalances in political and cultural representation.
Steve, hardly anyone denies the existence of a disparity in earnings between men and women. They just dispute that sexism is the cause. People do deny that we live in a rape culture because look at our laws and how our culture actually reacts to proven rape. Hardly anyone denies that there's a disparity, I'm not using the word imbalance, in political representation. They just dispute that sexism and discrimination is involved. Hillary Clinton is a presidential nominee, for fuck's sake, and I don't know what the hell cultural representation is. There are plenty of famous female actresses. There are plenty of famous female musicians. I assume that's what you meant. You have no proof or credible evidence of the things you're saying, but you believe them anyway, and then say anyone who denies those things on that basis are just gross sexists. I don't think anyone has explained just how utterly batshit crazy these ideas are. I mean, they've been tossed around and mocked quite rightly, but honestly examine what's happening for a few moments. Someone is claiming that sexism causes something with no proof, and then calls people who point the fact that there's no credible proof out sexists. Think about this with any other topic, and you'll see how crazy it truly is, and how frazzled your mind needs to be to think this way. Try to conjure this image in your head, Steve. Imagine that you're a prosecutor, putting someone on trial for murder, and you have no evidence. You have zero evidence that this person killed someone else. Everything you have is not concrete in the slightest, so you give your lackluster case about why you think this person is a murderer, and then the jury departs to come to their conclusion. They come back out and say, "We find the defendant not guilty." Your reaction, Steve, would be to get up out of your chair and say, "These jurors are murderers. The defendant is obviously guilty. How can we trust these murderers?" I have no more words for this.
And other problems that are widely accepted and seriously discussed outside of the misogynist circle jerk that is the atheist community on YouTube.
Literally, everything you say is backwards, Steve. I don't have a circle jerk. In fact, I take steps to make sure I don't have a circle jerk. A lot of my content is about responding to videos on feminism, but there are other opinions thrown in there too. I've done videos where I challenge someone on the right. I've done videos where I've disagreed about gun control. I've done videos where I've debunked terrible journalism on both sides of the aisle. What is incredible is that a decent number of my audience disagreed with those videos. And you know what? They may think I'm a moron on those particular topics. Obviously, I still think I'm right, but you get my point. I left my ratings on. I banned no one. I let discussion about my opinions and the opinions of others flourish in my comment section. I responded to major criticisms and then left the video there. You do no such thing. Look at the comment section in your video. You have deleted comments and people are arguing with themselves because you've deleted their opponent and your ratings are disabled. Which is more of a circle jerk? A channel that discusses a variety of topics where people are free to publicly disagree with the creator of the content, or a channel that turns their ratings off and deletes the comments that disagree with them? Steve, please stop accusing the entire world of doing what you are doing. I've learned over my year and a half on this website that is the final stage with people who are truly dogmatic. The final stage of the ideologically brainwashed is to accuse everyone else of what they are currently doing. They'll call you an asshole and then accuse you and everyone else of calling them an asshole. They will lie about your position and then accuse you of lying about their position. They will metaphorically hit themselves while shouting, "Stop hitting yourself!" thinking they are making you hit yourself. It's truly horrifying how deluded you are. It's the easiest thing in the world to break out of this as well. All you need to do is admit that you were wrong and that it is your fault that you were wrong. I guarantee you, Steve, if you put out a video that had the ratings enabled and comments enabled where you said, "You know, everyone, I've been acting like kind of a dick lately. I've been blocking disagreement and deleting comments on my channel, disabling ratings, and that wasn't right. I guess I just let my ego get the best of me, and I didn't examine things to the fullest extent. I smeared some people I shouldn't have smeared. I apologize. I do want to have honest discussions." That Steve will not be coming back. I promise. People would celebrate your breakthrough. You don't even have to admit that you're wrong. Just take the first steps in actually speaking to people who disagree like they're human beings. Then that will follow naturally. I'm trying to help you.
But lest you think that sexism is the only form of bigotry running rampant in atheist spaces on YouTube, let me assure you, number 2, it also has a racism problem. And it's the best kind of racism too, the willfully oblivious kind. One of the most subscribed to atheists on YouTube recently made videos espousing his views that, for example, black Americans who speak out against racial injustice are part of a victim cult, or the displacement of black folks by gentrification isn't a problem because it results in nicer neighborhoods with fewer thugs hanging around, or, my personal favorite, the true outrage isn't racism, but people calling people like him racists. Because why would anyone think that the white guy who makes a virtue out of publicly not giving a shit about black people was a racist? It's ridiculous.
Are you done? Okay, good, you're done. Steve, I don't believe a word you say because you've named no names here, so I can't actually go check for myself that these are exact quotes or just your distorted version of someone's opinions. We have already established that your brain is cooked, Steve, so I'm not trusting a single word that leaps out of your mouth without extremely substantive evidence backing it up. But I do want to hone in on something you said within your little rant you just had. Allow me to discuss a small detail. Why was it important that you say it was a white guy? Isn't anybody who publicly doesn't give a shit about black people in particular a racist of some kind? I do want to make you aware of a very important distinction that your brain has melted into oblivion. There is a difference between thinking that a certain claim of racial injustice is either exaggerated or not in fact fueled by racism and not giving a shit about black people. You simply cannot separate biological classifications of human beings from ideas. Except yourself, obviously. You're the shining beacon on the hill that defies all of this mumbo-jumbo, right? That's how everyone who thinks the way you do operates.
Hang on, I'm not done.
Shit.
Number 3, it has a religious bigotry problem too.
Are you telling me that what you propose is that the community of atheists has an issue with religion? I mean, stop the presses, ladies and gentlemen. Steve, you don't understand the difference between bigotry and disagreeing with an idea held by a bunch of people. I want to take a look at the picture you put up. It says, quote, Islam isn't a race, it's a religion practiced by a bunch of ignorant cave-dwelling terrorists, unquote. By your very own metric, Steve, you are a bigot towards anti-feminists. What's the logical difference between the latter half of that sentiment and anti-feminism is a position held by a bunch of ignorant misogynists? Do you understand where you're going wrong here, Steve? Do you understand how long you've been standing in the mirror screaming at the person staring back at you to get out of the way? Islam isn't a race, by the way, just to be clear.
The ugliest religious bigotry in the YouTube atheist community is, of course, directed at Muslims, who are commonly stereotyped as potential terrorists.
Just like how men are stereotyped by feminists as potential rapists, huh? Remember that whole rape culture thing that totally exists, Steve?
And whose religion is viewed as inherently worse and more dangerous than any other.
Well, I don't think people see it as inherently worse, but it is the religion that's causing the most mayhem throughout the world right now in an objective sense. Do you think that is a bigoted statement? Would you or would you not agree that Islam is the religion that, at present, is causing the most death and destruction throughout the world? Because if that is a bigoted statement, then you are effectively telling me that facts are bigotry. The people who are killed the most by Muslims are other Muslims for being the wrong kind of Muslim, Steve. So when you say that my addressing this problem head-on is some form of bigotry against Muslims, you are effectively running interference for Muslims who are doing the killing. You are doing nothing to assist those Muslims who are being killed left and right in the Middle East for not submitting to the Islamic State. I prefer to address the people who want to throw gay people off of cliffs before I get around to criticizing the people who would just prefer they not get married. If you don't mind. I have my priorities.
But there's still plenty of judgmental condescension left over for Christians and religious folks in general.
It is impossible to correct someone without being, in some sense, condescending. You need to actively display superiority by saying, you're wrong, I'm right, and here's why. This is exactly the type of criticism that your beloved Four Horsemen received when their books came out. Hardly anyone actually dealt with the points. They just pulled the feelings card, as Daniel Dennett told Harris, Dawkins, and Hitchens during their meeting. Have you noticed, Mr. Shives, that throughout this entire video you have not dealt with any of the actual points levied against your position? You have dealt with exactly 0 of them because you have nothing, absolutely nothing. So you revert to trying to spin things into sexism, racism, misogyny, bigotry, or whatever you can use to smear your opponents into unfair submission. The goal is not the truth with you, and it may have never been. The goal with you now, Steve, is to get to a point where you can feel you can justifiably call your opponent a bad person, as opposed to dealing with their actual arguments. I've gotten angry during videos before, and probably this video too. I've made mistakes in my life, but I like to think that I am deep down a good person. I've told the truth in situations where telling the truth would effectively make my life suck for a long time. I try to help people to the best of my ability. I've been strong for people when being strong was incredibly difficult. I've stood up to bullies. I've helped friends get through difficult times. I'm generous with the money I earn. I don't judge the character of someone based on things that they can't control. But since I run a YouTube channel that routinely counters falsehoods put forth by feminists, I'm all of a sudden some sort of disgusting sexist. I bet if you actually talked to anti-feminists, you would realize that we are decent people, just with a different opinion. There are feminists who allow people to disagree and don't think that I'm a raging misogynist for the opinions I hold. You've let this cultish obsession of yours take your basic sense of compassion and completely disintegrate it. You are not the angelic voice of reason in a sea of conflict and bigoted rage. You've hopped into a box made of steel, pounding on the walls, staring at the uncaged masses, screaming through a tiny window, "Haha, all of you morons are in boxes that I put you in. Good thing I got into this box because people in boxes are evil." Steve, you perform an action and then blame everyone except yourself for performing that action, while erasing your memory of ever having performed it. It is jaw-dropping and quite honestly insane. You don't need a debate. You need help.
Many YouTube atheists will still cite belief in God as evidence of mental illness.
And you'll cite an opposition to feminism as an example of moral depravity. Eat me.
Thus denigrating religious folks and the mentally ill at the same time. Not that they give a shit.
Steve, you have no place to discuss denigration. You spent the first half of this video denigrating a diverse group of many people as morally deficient. There's that mirror again.
Pushing the religious into the mud and then pointing and laughing at them is one of YouTube atheism's most treasured pastimes.
Only if you're a moron who can't distinguish between spirited disagreement and bigotry. Hey Steve, did you know that within the first half of this video you pushed anti-feminists and YouTube atheists into the mud and then started laughing at them? I mean, that's the pastime of all religious and feminist YouTubers. How is that statement dissolving in your head? Is it, well, they deserve it for being so sexist?
That might be why. Number 4, it's addicted to drama and conflict.
Every single time there is a disagreement between two parties, and those two parties are discussing that disagreement, there is conflict. Mainly because two people have conflicting viewpoints and those things are clashing. If you debated a religious person, Shives, you would be having a conflict with that person. I've seen people use drama as a synonym for disagreement as well. Yes, Steve, I disagree with both your ideas and your behavior, and I'm making it publicly known that I disagree with it. This does not mean that I'm addicted to drama and conflict. I'm using you as a springboard to launch my opinions off of. You are not the only person who exhibits these ideas and behaviors, Steve. You're a figurehead of stupidity, and my criticisms apply to anyone who acts in the manner you do. Please recognize this as soon as possible.
Some of the most watched atheists on YouTube today began making videos in response to creationists. Some of them conducted themselves with class, dignity, and intellectual honesty, striving to have civil conversations with often exasperating adversaries.
Steve, why won't you have a civil discussion with an anti-feminist?
But even back in those less fractious early years, before the community's pervasive racism and sexism surfaced...
Wrong, Steve. Wrong. The community did not split because sexism and racism surfaced. The community split because a bunch of feminists decided that atheism needed to be about feminism too. A bunch of feminists decided that a community that was totally fine with everyone, including women, until feminists showed up, was actually a disgusting, toxic movement filled with misogyny. Instead of defending that community, you readily admitted that the community that you decided to join was stacked to the brim with hatred for women and racial minorities. Steve, you will do and believe literally anything to avoid being called an ist of some type, won't you? You'll take advantage of your seemingly infinite logical plasticity in order to avoid being called something. And in the process, you turn into the thing you were worried about being called in service of not being called that thing. I will not let you get away with calling an opinion that isn't sexist or racist, sexist and racist. I can brush off these ridiculous accusations because I know what my ideas actually are and what those ideas actually entail. You seem to just be a cog looking for a machine to be put into. Well, Steve, you found your machine. Congratulations.
The most popular personalities were those who gleefully bullied their targets. Small wonder then that once the creationist opponents had been exhausted, the bullies turned and found new enemies within atheist circles. And it turns out that most people who enjoyed watching obnoxious white dudes attack Christians were just as entertained by watching those same obnoxious white dudes attack women, Muslims, and racial justice activists.
Steve, you're a racist and sexist. And I'm not just calling you that on no basis, but it seems like whenever you use the phrase white dudes or white guys, you always use it in tandem with negative adjectives. You will not get me to believe that you're using the white and male adjectives in anything other than a derogatory manner either. It's like if I said, they thought it was a great idea to listen to a bunch of annoying and intellectually dishonest black people. There's absolutely no need for me to plug the black adjective in there. The only reason I would place that in there is if I thought black had just as much negative connotation as the word annoying. Why is that necessary? Why does the race or sex of a specific person matter when discussing a problem with drama and conflict, Steve? And what were the basis for those quote-unquote attacks you mentioned? Was it maybe that bullshit was being peddled? Or is it the fact that anyone opposing these particular bullshit artists are bigots?
That the YouTube atheist community is now dominated by professional trolls who manufacture conflict in order to generate content and views would be bad enough if the damage they caused was confined to YouTube, but it's not.
Okay, you're tiring me out. I can't just sit here and explain the difference between ideas and people to you. If you don't understand that basic fact, then you will never understand anything I'm saying to you. Feminism is not women, and Black Lives Matter is not black people. I will also have you know that there are many women who oppose feminism and many black people who oppose the actions of the Black Lives Matter movement. Look them in the eyes and tell them that they are racists and sexists. Except you won't, because those biological demographics make you piss your pampers when they disagree with you. You're pathetic, Steve. I'm trying to help you, but for every second I watch this video, my hope in regards to your self-awareness drains a tremendous amount.
Number 5, it reflects poorly on the rest of the atheist movement. Ever wonder why, with a few notable exceptions, YouTube atheists are not invited to address secular conferences or represent atheist organizations to the public?
Have you been invited, Steve? Please be invited. You can't block people in real life.
If you're lucky, your first contact with atheism on YouTube came in the form of one of the more responsible voices, like Aaron Ra, Seth Andrews, or Matt Dillahunty.
Conveniently, all of them hopped into the feminist ideological box too. What a weird coincidence.
But unfortunately, it's much more likely that before you got to them, you discovered one of the people I'm talking about in this video, one of the proudly offensive, cluelessly bigoted assholes who might as well be caricatures of atheists drawn by alarmist evangelists.
Name one.
We atheists like to pat ourselves on the back for being more reasonable than the religious folks, but I don't think that's true. And judging by the most visible representatives of our movement on YouTube, the most unreasonable belief shared by many of us might be the belief that we're the reasonable ones.
Of course it is, Steve. Because you think that everything you think is what people must base reason on. You think that your opinions are the objectively correct ones, and anyone who disputes a foundation of yours is evil. Anyone who doesn't argue within the bubble you constructed is instantly a bad person. I beg of you to talk to someone. Talk to one of these awful, disgusting, evil, sexist YouTubers that you hate so much. Consider them a human being. Because this video is not an example of someone taking down the atheist movement on YouTube with a rational argument and sick burns. This is someone who got beat in a rational argument, and so is reverting to childish, ooh, I'm telling strategies in order to retain some modicum of respect from his ever-shrinking fan base. I have surpassed you in subscribers, Steve. When I made my last video response to you, I was still much smaller than you were. Your YouTube career is not dying because there are just so many bigots and assholes around. Your YouTube career is dying because you're being a bigot and an asshole. You make me sad. Have a wonderful day.